Imagine for a moment, you wake up one morning and suddenly you have the ability to fly like Superman. No need for plane tickets, airport queues, or traffic jams. You're as free as a bird, soaring over cities, mountains, and oceans. The ultimate dream, right? But what if I told you that in reality, this dream would turn into a real nightmare? Today, we're going to dive together into the reasons why flying like Superman would actually be a terrifying and almost impossible experience for the average person. Get ready to see your dream crumble, point by point. The G-Force. Imagine you're ready to take off. You go from 0 to 500 kilometers per hour in a flash. But suddenly, everything goes black. What happened? In an instant, the G-Force hit you like an invisible punch, knocking you unconscious. Every time you accelerate, turn, or change direction in flight, your body undergoes significant pressure. For those who don't know, G-forces are the forces of gravity that act on you when you're in motion. Fighter pilots sometimes endure up to 9G, which is 9 times their body weight. And they're trained for it, equipped with special suits. You, with no training, could lose consciousness at 4 or 5G. In the scenario described earlier, you went from 0 to 500 kilometers per hour in 2 seconds, which is equivalent to experiencing 7G all at once, well beyond the safe limit. Maybe intense training, like that of astronauts, could prepare you to withstand G-forces. Not really. G-forces vary greatly depending on your movements, and in the case of unassisted flight, you'd be constantly exposed to unpredictable variations. Result? Even with training, you would frequently risk losing consciousness, and in the worst cases, could suffer irreversible brain damage. However, training might help reduce these risks. The speed. Let's imagine you have managed to overcome the first obstacle by opting for smooth and controlled accelerations. Flying is one thing, but flying fast is even better, right? After all, Superman can cross continents in just seconds. But for you, what speed would you need to reach to really fly? Of course, if you can fly like Superman, you're probably able to hover without any problem. However, once you start moving, even slowly, everything changes. At a speed of 100 kilometers per hour, you start to feel the effects of the wind, but it's still manageable. But at 300 kilometers per hour, that's when things get seriously complicated. You'll have to deal with air resistance, a force that's often overlooked but is formidable. At this speed, the air would become like an invisible wall, hitting your body with incredible violence. Maybe an ultra-resistant aerodynamic suit could protect you, right? Well, not really, because the faster you go, the more air resistance increases exponentially. And I'm not even talking about the heat generated by friction. At Mach 1, it's like being hit by 3 times the force of Cyclone Olivia, which struck Barrow Island, Australia on April 4, 1996, with a record wind speed of 408 kilometers per hour. The air resistance and heat generated by friction would be so intense that they could damage your internal organs, exposing you to serious, even fatal injuries. And even a sophisticated suit couldn't fully protect you, especially considering it would need to be light and flexible. If it's too heavy or rigid, flying would be simply impossible. But such a compromise on weight and flexibility means the materials used would probably not be strong enough to protect you effectively. The altitude. Okay, let's imagine you've managed to get through all this. You're flying, you've found your rhythm, and you decide to gain some altitude to enjoy the view. But the higher you go, the thinner the air becomes. At 5,000 meters altitude, atmospheric pressure is cut in half. At 8,000 meters, we enter what's known as the death zone in mountaineering, where the oxygen level is so low that even the most experienced climbers start seeing stars. And not in a good way. You could use an oxygen tank, like mountaineers do, to counter the lack of air. But the oxygen tank won't solve another major problem: temperature. At this altitude, temperatures can drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius. Your body simply isn't designed to withstand such cold, even with equipment. Within minutes, you would risk hypothermia, and without adequate protection, your skin could freeze in less than 10 minutes. the orientation. Finally, there's one last issue that's rarely mentioned: orientation. On the ground, you have visual markers, signs, roads, buildings. But in the air, the sky is vast, infinite, and often every cloud looks like the last. You could easily lose your bearings, in every sense of the word. The risk of disorientation is huge. Pilots, even the most experienced, can fall victim to spatial disorientation, a state where your brain can no longer tell up from down. Imagine flying at hundreds of kilometers per hour, not knowing where you're going. You might think of using a GPS for navigation, but in the air, there's no guarantee that GPS would be accurate, especially at high speeds. So the best solution is to fly low enough to clearly see the terrain and landmarks, which will help you better navigate. Flying requires much more than just superpowers. It's a constant battle against the elements, your own body, and physics. So, what do you think now? Flying like Superman, a dream, or a nightmare? Next time you dream of flying, remember, sometimes it's better to keep your feet on the ground and leave superhero dreams to the comic books. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to tell me what you think. Would you still be willing to fly like Superman despite the drawbacks? Or do you think it's better to keep your feet on the ground? See you soon for a new video.